Hello and welcome back to Silver Age, Silver Screen, the podcast where we watch, discuss, and review sci-fi, cult, superhero, and other stereotypically geeky films. I'm your co-host, Casey Jarmes.
And I'm your other co-host, Riley Thorpe.
Yeah, and you know, Riley, we mostly just talk about the movies on this show. What if the audience wants to know more about us? Like, for instance, you're from Wisconsin, right?
I am, yeah. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or a suburb out there. And you are from Iowa, correct?
Yeah. But anyway, you're from Wisconsin, that's like the big cheese producer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of cheese.
So you like things that are cheesy?
Of course.
Well, then you're gonna love the movie we're watching today.
Oh, yeah. Great movie. Love this movie. It's a movie, if you rent it on DVD, it comes with a block of cheese for you. Open up the DVD, there's just cheese filling the DVDs. Honestly, it was a miracle the DVD player could play, you know?
We are, of course, talking about the 2002 Spider-Man movie starring Tobey Maguire, directed by Sam Raimi. And you know, in the show, we've in the past talked about the sort of history of superhero movies, the big ones that define the genre, help build it. We talked about Superman the movie, Batman, X-Men, Iron Man, and I think the most important one we haven't talked about yet is this. This movie, A, it was really good, but B, it was a smash success, and the current superhero boom rests largely on the foundation this cheesy mess of a movie made.
This, in conjunction with X-Men, and to a lesser of an extent, the Blade movies, they really pioneered this new wave of comic book adaptations in cinema. Before that, you could make movies about like Superman and Batman because those are popular characters, you know?
And to be fair, Spider-Man also was very popular.
Yeah, so it was really in conjunction with Spider-Man, the X-Men, and to a lesser extent Blade, and later on Iron Man in the MCU, that people realized, oh shit, you can make a good and successful film out of lesser-known characters. And this movie was, thankfully, a smash success. Who knows what would have happened, what cinema would look like today if this movie and other superhero movies of the time failed, you know? Maybe Martin Scorsese would be happy. I don't know.
Oh god, I want to rant about... Point is, Spider-Man, where should we begin with this? It opens up with, honestly, a very edgy, melodramatic narration from Tobey Maguire about how his life isn't happy because of the responsibilities he has. I don't remember the exact quote, but it was cheesy and would have probably been unbearable if it wasn't for that wonderful Danny Elfman score in the background.
Yeah, Danny Elfman does the music. Tobey Maguire plays the titular superhero Spider-Man and Peter Parker. Also in the cast is Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin, who, spoiler alert, is the villain of this film. Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane Watson. James Franco as Harry Osborn, and a lot of other really good castings that we'll get to when the time comes. I love how, just starting off with this movie, I love how these movies in many ways have become memes. Not in many ways, they've become memes over the last few years, for obvious reasons. They're really cheesy, really silly at times, but they're also at the same time pretty good movies.
Yeah, like early on in the movie when we get introduced to Norman Osborn, he says the line, he says, you know, I'm something of a scientist myself, and that wouldn't have been funny in 2002.
No, but it's like hilarious now. There's a bunch of lines in this movie, a bunch of moments that I'm like, oh shit. Looking at it like 19 years later, it's crazy to think of how internet culture has changed so much of my perspective of this movie. Because I grew up with these movies. Like, when I was a kid, I was like watching fucking Teletubbies and Elmo and shit like that. And then one day my dad came home from work and was like, hey Riley, I got a movie for you to watch. And it was fucking Spider-Man. And my tiny 3-year-old mind was blown. I own all 3 of them on DVD. I've watched them all throughout my life, and I've loved them. Yeah, I admit that they're pretty over the top and pretty campy, but I've always loved these movies. particularly the first two, especially the second one. But the point of why I bring it up as a meme is because as someone who grew up loving these movies and with Spider-Man is my favorite superhero, it was so funny because I remember like when you and I were like seniors in high school, this was like 3-4 years ago, people were shitting on these movies every chance they got. They're like, they're so dumb, they're cheesy, stupid, it's whatever. They were a joke, essentially. But then they came on Netflix and the entire world discovered them again. And now, ever since then, for the last like 3 years, there have been whole ass meme pages devoted to talking about and making fun of these beloved movies. Like, people rediscovered them quite recently. And I'm telling you, Netflix has a lot more power than people give it credit for. They can create new cultural movements.
You know, going slightly off topic for a second, I haven't seen the Star Wars prequels in years, and I thought they were just kind of okay when I watched them. They certainly aren't masterpieces, but it's gonna be weird when I inevitably go back and rewatch, say, Revenge of the Sith, because every single line in that dumb movie is a meme.
Right. Same exact thing happened to the B movie. Remember when the B movie came on Netflix and then suddenly
oh god,
ever
the
since
B
then,
movie. That movie deserved to get the reputation it has because
It really
it's
did.
such a dumb movie in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, so that's a little bit of my history personally with it. People love them. I love them. I had a great time watching this one. Anyway, big title sequence, Danny Elfman's score. Peter Parker voices over how he loves Mary Jane, but he's not the cool kid. He's the guy that's running alongside the bus as it's driving away. He's a loser.
Also,
He's being...
dickhole bus driver.
Yeah.
Actually, no. Every single person on that bus except Mary Jane is just jeering. Like, did Peter go to high school in, like, the hell dimension where everyone's evil? Why is Mary Jane there if everyone there is evil? So many questions.
They are on their way to a field trip to Columbia Science Department. Harry Osborn, played by James Franco, is dropped off by his rich father, Norman Osborn.
Yeah, you know, because multimillionaire CEOs, they drop their sons off for field trips.
Mm-hmm. And then their son complains about how they don't love them. They start walking through this lab where they're testing on spiders. But one of the spiders got loose, and as Peter starts introducing himself to Mary Jane and getting bullied by everybody, as it happens, and Harry Osborn hits on Mary Jane, a lot happens in this scene.
Yeah, like, just looking over it, this is a very dense with plot movie. Like, it sets up a lot of stuff early on, but it managed to work somehow.
Yes, by the time Peter, we all know this, Peter gets bitten by a radioactive spider, and he goes home. We meet Aunt May and Uncle Ben. By the time he, gets his powers, I'm pretty sure it was only slightly over 20 minutes into the movie.
Probably less than that. Also, I'd like to note just two small things about how Peter gets his powers. Or actually probably three small things about how Peter gets his powers. Number one, these spiders aren't radioactive in this version. They're genetically engineered. It's a small thing, but it's worth note. Like, why get bit by spider change DNA?
I don't know.
Number two, you can hear while Peter is having his little love triangle thing with Mary Jane and taking photos, the scientist lady describing, we mix DNA from all these different spiders to create a new species of spider. And then after Peter gets bitten, there's a TV right next to him, and it just pops up the words, new species, and then it shows DNA being changed. Subtlety is this movie's forte. And finally, just one minor thing. Peter, as soon as he gets home after being bit by the spider, Peter collapses onto the floor and is unconscious for 18 hours. And when he gets up in the morning, he doesn't really question it at all because, hey, I'm buff now and I don't need glasses. Everything's fine. I was just unconscious for 18 hours after being bitten by a poisonous spider. I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's nothing.
Yeah, and then at no point does he or anyone else draw attention to the fact that he is now ripped and no longer needs his glasses.
I mean, Mary Jane calls attention to it in, like, the most awkward scene. Like, Tobey Maguire, throughout this entire film, he is so awkward and nerdy.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel about it. Sometimes it gets across, yeah, Peter's this nerdy loser guy. And sometimes it just comes across as, ooh, that's too awkward to the point where I'm not even sure if he's doing that on purpose. But anyway, when Peter goes to school the next day, now that he has his powers, he runs into Mary Jane and she's like, oh, you don't have your glasses on. Did you get contacts? And he just stares at her and doesn't say anything.
This is, of course, after she slips and falls. He catches her.
Right.
But then, like, catches all her food on the tray, which was done practically. Like, that was done. It took him...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it took him, like, almost 100 takes. But he did that for real. No strings, wires, nothing.
Wow, that seems pointless.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is, Mary slips and Peter, with his new reflexes, like, grabs her and then stares.
Yeah. See, when it comes to Tobey Maguire's performance, it's like, you can tell he's going for this, like, awkward teenage kid, doesn't know how to talk to anybody. But at the end of the day, it's like, there's some lines where he just kind of feels like he's a piece of wood that's just kind of standing there with his big, beady blue eyes. And it's just like, I don't know if that was the right call. Maybe a little more emotion?
There's a very thin line between awkward and wooden, and he
toes it.
Jumps back and forth across the line so quickly, so fast. But anyway, as Peter's eating lunch, some web shoots out of his wrist and it gets on a tray, and he accidentally throws it on the school bully, who tries to beat him up. But don't worry, Peter manages to evade the bully by backflipping over him.
And, like, masterfully dodging every single one of his punches.
Yeah. We've talked in the past about how Peter Parker in movies is so bad at keeping his secret identity. Add this movie to the list where everyone would know who Spider-Man is.
Right, exactly. By the way, do you know who played the bully?
It was Joe Manganiello, or however that's pronounced, right?
Yeah. Joe Manganiello played Flash Thompson. He has most recently played Deathstroke in the Snyder Cut and in the theatrically released Justice League movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing's going to come from that, but okie doke, sure, why not?
He was almost in the new Batman movie before Ben Affleck left. I was just like, that's Joe Manganiello. This movie speeds through. This movie's 2 hours long. And I would say the first little less than an hour is the Spider-Man origin story. And it's very dense, as you said. It goes through a lot of story. But like from the time it goes from him getting bitten by the radioactive spider, or the genetically engineered spider, like the beginning of the movie to that point, to him developing powers, it's very, very quick, which on the surface might seem a little rushed, but at the end of the day, it's like, we all know Spider-Man's origin.
Yeah, we all know Spider-Man's origin. I mean, it's not like when they make a new series with Andrew Garfield, they would need to do the entire first hour of this movie again, but edgier.
For rewatch purposes, it's very quick, very short part of the movie. It gets the point across nicely. The film just kind of goes on with the rest of its story after that, which I appreciated. At this point, knowing the story and having seen the movie, it's like, it's not like I have to sit down and watch an entire whole ass hour before he like actually kind of gets his powers. And the entire time he's looking for his parents, and that storyline never pans out.
So, like, before we watched Amazing Spider-Man for this show, I liked it. I liked it less after I watched it again and had to think critically about it. I like it even a little bit less after this one, because this one does the origin better. But anyway, while Peter's developing his powers and... Oh, by the way, Peter practices his powers by climbing up the side of a building and, like, jumping off and swinging because he has no sense of self-preservation.
Yeah, no, not at all.
While that's all going on, we got a subplot with Norman Osborn. He's developing this new super steroid, which may or may not cause people to be evil and crazy. And his funding gets cut, so he tests it on himself. And he becomes evil and crazy and strangles another scientist to death.
As you do.
You see, this is why you don't test things on yourself, Norman.
Yeah, that's why you test it on your son, dude.
I mean, depending on the continuity, yeah.
Peter climbs up a bunch of walls, starts running along the rooftops of the building, starts testing his webbing powers, which is a point of criticism for this movie because true to Spider-Man in the comics and in all other adaptations, Spider-Man's ability to shoot webs comes from these web shooters that he attaches to his wrists. They're a device that he had created and attached to himself. However, in this adaptation, it's organic. It just comes out of his wrists.
And can I be honest?
Yeah.
I don't give a shit. Do you give a shit?
Not really. Not at all. It's such an insignificant part of it. Even if you do have a problem with it, it works in the context of this movie because it's like this kid is dirt poor. Yes, he's very intelligent, but he does not have access to the technology to create web fluid and those webs at all. It's a point of criticism, but I'm like, what the fuck does it matter? You know? Like, just webs come out of his wrists. He's a superhero. It's Spider-Man. Fucking accept it. Shut up.
Although I will say, one criticism I have with this film, I don't think Spider-Man struggles at all in it. I think he just learns how to use his powers way too easy.
Yeah, that's fair.
No, it isn't. I was being facetious.
I don't know. I'll pretty much go with whatever you say. I was surprised upon rewatching it just how much in-camera practical effects there were. Like Peter climbing up the wall that looked super realistic, and that's because it was. They actually built a set and tilted it on its side. All that shit's real. A lot of it throughout the movie is real. However, there's also a significant portion of it that is CGI. And it's 2001 CGI.
And you can tell which portion.
Yes, like especially when he's running across the rooftops immediately after climbing up the wall. It's CGI. That said, it's very obvious, blatant CGI. That said, I feel like it works for me personally. This movie is super cheesy, over the top, and campy. So it having like really obvious CGI, I feel like it works with the silly, goofy tone of the movie. And it's incorporated well into the movie for the most part, I would argue. So, I don't know, the practical effects are great. There's a lot of them. The CGI is very often noticeable, like painfully noticeable, but I think it works for the tone of the film.
So, speaking of silly things in this movie, Peter, because he has a crush on Mary Jane, he tries to impress her by getting a new car. And to get money to get a new car, he becomes a pro wrestler. And side note, before he goes to pro wrestle, he draws out 8 different costumes in his notebook because apparently he's a really good artist in this continuity. Those are some good drawings, man.
Yeah, this was all after he's kind of been messing up on his chores, really distancing himself from Aunt May and Uncle Ben. And Uncle Ben gives him the whole, with great power comes great responsibility speech. Peter tells him off saying, "You're not my dad."
And I mean, that's a really, really mean thing to say, Peter. "You're not my dad." That's a horrible thing to say to Uncle Ben, you dick. But also, side note, wow, I forgot how much they shoehorn in that with great power comes great responsibility. Because Ben's lecturing Peter about his fight with Flash at the school, and he's like, with great power comes great responsibility. That doesn't really apply in this situation, Ben.
Yeah, but it's important, so gotta fit it in somehow, I guess.
I know. I mean, in the original comic where that line is from, it's not said by Ben, it's said by the narration.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever seen an adaptation of Spider-Man where they manage to work in the with great power comes great responsibility thing naturally. But anyway, Spider-Man's gonna go pro wrestler. Ooh, and he's got his costume. He worked really hard on it, and oh god. He just spray painted a spider logo on a red t-shirt and he's wearing sweatpants.
Yeah.
This is the worst costume I've ever seen. He's wearing snow gloves. Ugh, it's so cheesy.
It is really interesting to me because there are so many cameos in this one scene in particular. When he signs up to fight and he's talking to the lady at the desk, that woman's played by Octavia Spencer, who was in Hidden Figures, The Shape of Water, a lot of other really great stuff since then. Also in the scene, the announcer for the fights is played by Bruce Campbell, who worked with Sam Raimi on all the Evil Dead movies and has been in a cameo in all of his other movies since then, or at least the Spider-Man movies.
And I mean, if we're going to talk about famous actors showing up, well, famous actor might not be the right word, but famous people showing up during the WrestleMania scene, Bonesaw! the pro wrestler Spider-Man fights is played by Macho Man Randy Savage, hamming it up, and it's great.
Yeah, I was just like, what is going on in this scene? I recognize so many people. Spider-Man gets down there. He tells the guy that his name is the Human Spider, but the guy announces him as the Amazing Spider-Man.
Better name.
Yeah, it's a much better name. He gets into the ring, and turns out it's a cage match. They lower a giant cage and lock him inside with this guy. And, of course, because he's Spider-Man, he beats Bonesaw's ass inside him.
Yeah, says something kind of homophobic at one point, but yeah, he kicks Bonesaw's ass, and it's impressive.
And then he goes up to the manager of the fight to get his $3,000 that he's owed, but the guy only gives him $100. Spider-Man, feeling screwed out of his money, walking down the hall. Just as he's about to get out the elevator, a guy robs the manager, runs down the hall, and Peter does nothing as the guy gets away.
And, I mean, it's supposed to be, ooh, he did the wrong thing, and now he has to live with the consequences. But can I be honest? Yeah, that manager had it coming. He stole $2,900 from Peter Parker. And, I mean, the consequences of that action are pretty much unrelated.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't stop a thief running away, he'll murder your uncle. Doesn't really track.
I mean, the guy had a gun. What was he supposed to do? Granted, he's Spider-Man.
Yeah, also that! Like, armed robber, random high schooler. It's not really on Peter to stop that. There was a cop right next to him who didn't stop the guy.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's Spider-Man. We all know what happens. The robber, he tries to steal Uncle Ben's car, shoots Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben dies as Peter clutches his body. Spider-Man has learned the consequences of his actions. He goes to chase down the thief and get revenge, and the thief accidentally dies, so Spider-Man doesn't have to get his hands dirty.
After that, or that same night, there's a military testing with one of Oscorp's rivals, and the Green Goblin attacks them, bombs the entire place, kills everybody there, ensuring that Oscorp will succeed over the next however many years.
Yay for murder! So glad that no one in the US military was concerned with this drone that just blew up people in front of them. I feel like there should be consequences of that. Beyond Norman Osborn is doing good in business now.
Isn't this kind of a coincidence here? Norman Osborn's doing business as his rivals and enemies are getting killed? Yeah, that's weird.
Whatever. Peter and Harry and Mary Jane graduate high school. Norman snubs Harry to talk to Peter instead at the graduation, so Harry starts dating Mary Jane. And now that he's an adult, Peter decides to do some Spider-Manning, and he somehow gets this really professionally made costume.
Yep.
I don't like the costume in this movie, I'm gonna admit. I really hate the raised webbing. It just looks weird. He's like a basketball.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's better than the Amazing Spider-Man suit by a mile. But
the problem with that one was the dark, evil eyes. That one wasn't great, but at least it looked like it was the traditional smoothness of the comics. This one just looks uncomfortable.
Yeah, true, but at least this one's shot well. The lighting isn't like pitch black in the front and making it look like a wet basketball the entire time. Whatever. I like the suit. I do admit, I do agree with you. The webbing is a little distracting. It just seems very thick. Especially around like the hands and the fingers and stuff. I do agree with you. That said, I think other than that, the design is pretty great. From then on, Spider-Man does some Spider-Manning, vigilanteism. He saves some people. He's getting notoriety around New York. People are singing about him in the streets. And then the Daily Bugle, ran by J. Jonah Jameson, hears about him and starts slandering Spider-Man's name in the media. Now, I have to say one thing before we continue. There are a lot of castings in these comic book superhero films that everyone's like, dude, that's perfect. Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. Robert Downey Jr. is Iron Man. Ryan Reynolds is Deadpool. Heath Ledger is the Joker, and so on and so forth. I'm going to go on a limb right now and say that definitively the best casting for any role in a comic book movie ever goes to J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. This is perfect casting. and he steals the show for me in all three movies. I think J. Jonah Jameson is amazing in this trilogy.
I don't have any disagreements. He's fantastic as just this grumpy dickhole editor who wants pictures of Spider-Man! He's destroying the city! Urgh.
He's like, his wife constantly keeps calling him, but he's like hanging up on her. He's like being an asshole to everybody. Hoffman! I don't know if you're aware of this, but Hoffman is played by Ted Raimi, the brother of Sam Raimi, the director of this movie. Yeah.
Hey, want to know an interesting little bit of comic trivia?
Yes.
Do you know who J. Jonah Jameson is apparently based off and who wanted to play him in the live-action movie?
I know that Stan Lee wanted to play him in the live-action movie.
Yep. Apparently, J. Jonah Jameson was based off of Stan Lee because I guess Stan Lee was just awful when he was editor-in-chief at Marvel.
Yeah, I can believe it.
But yeah, Peter gets a job taking photos of Spider-Man that are very clearly like set-up photos. Which means that he knows Spider-Man because secret identity hard, and I'm sure there won't be any consequences of that.
Not at all. Spider-Man gets a job at the Daily Bugle. He runs into Mary Jane, and in this scene we learn that Harry and Peter are now living together in the city, and Harry and Mary Jane are now dating, which is kind of a dick move on Harry's part, but you know.
I mean, Peter could have asked her.
True. I'm not saying Peter is entitled to anything. I'm just saying, Harry even has a line. It's like, I know you liked her. You never said anything to her, so I just figured I might say something. And I'm like, dude, you're still kind of screwing over your bro here.
Yeah, I guess. During the Thanksgiving Day parade, oh, by the way, there's a scene where Norman finds out that he's getting fired even though the company's doing good because of business shenanigans.
Yeah.
That'll be relevant later. During a Thanksgiving Day parade where Harry and Mary Jane are there, up on a ledge, watching the parade, the Green Goblin attacks, and we finally get a good look at his suit. It's not good.
No. It looks like a Power Ranger villain.
You know, I've heard that before, but no, it really doesn't. What it does look like is this weird robot that's all pointy, and it's inconsistent on whether or not the suit has goggles. So in some scenes, you see these yellow lenses, and in some scenes, you just see Willem Dafoe's eyes.
He can retract them. There's some scenes, if you look or listen, the sunglasses will go up or down.
Okay, fair enough. But it doesn't look good with them down, and it doesn't look good with them up.
Yeah. No, you see, the reason why that was a thing, the reason why it looks like it does, is because Willem Dafoe requested that this suit be, he wanted to do his own stunts. And Dafoe does do a vast majority of his own stunts in this movie. And they were originally going to go with more of like an animatronic, like more comic accurate, fleshy mask. But Willem Dafoe was like, no, I want to be in the suit. I wanted to wear a mask, and I want to be in these action scenes. So they made it more like a comic-inspired flight suit that makes sense for a character like him to wear while flying through the air on a giant military glider. That said, it looks really, really bad, but again works for me personally because this fits with the tone of the movie. It's like, yeah, it's just cheesy and weird and silly. So naturally his suit's gonna look like that as well.
I don't know if it's a good suit, but I will say it is saved by Willem Dafoe's just over-the-top, hammy, cartoon villain performance.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Willem Dafoe is incredible in this movie. And though we have our gripes with the suit, I totally agree with you. It is not good, but it is infinitely better than the face herpes thing Dane DeHaan had in The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
You see, I'm normally the guy who defends the Amazing Spider-Man series. I have no defense of that.
Because that looked fucking horrible. Spider-Man saves some people, him and Green Goblin start fighting. Green Goblin kills the board of directors, almost kills Harry Osborn and Mary Jane. Spider-Man defeats the Green Goblin, saves Mary Jane, brings her to a rooftop where he just kind of leaves her.
I mean, he said she could take the elevator. Oh, and he says the classic line, "I'm your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man." After that, Green Goblin decides, hey, I should make Spider-Man my friend and we can do evil together. So he ambushes and kidnaps Spider-Man and doesn't take Spider-Man's mask off for some reason.
Nope.
And Spider-Man refuses to team up with him because he's a superhero. What did you expect, Gobby?
Right. And I will say, this scene was really interesting to me, particular the one where Spider-Man gets knocked out and kidnapped by the Green Goblin. Yes, I do think it's kind of ridiculous that he didn't lift up his mask to see who it was, but apart from that, that scene is very interesting now because of the whole meme culture surrounding this movie. Because in that scene, Peter gets hired by the Daily Bugle for his pictures of Spider-Man. J. Jonah Jameson insults him, as he insults everybody. Peter realizes that he's going to be working for the guy that's slandering his name in the public eye. And what's interesting is that there was recently been a TikTok trend where, not a big one, but videos I've seen and memes on Instagram. There's that clip of the Joker from The Dark Knight, how he was talking to that guy in the interrogation room. Like, people in their final moments will show you who they really are. And then it cuts to the clip of J. Jonah Jameson in his office being attacked by the Green Goblin. Green Goblin grabs him by the neck, lifts him into the air, and is like, where is the guy that takes all the photos of Spider-Man? I need to find him. And J. Jonah Jameson's one concern is protecting Peter Parker. That right there, for me, looking back, these memes made me realize, like, oh shit, he's like more than just a comedic side character. They actually are trying to make him a three-dimensional character. Like, yeah, he's an asshole, but at the end of the day, he's willing to sacrifice himself to protect innocent people.
Yeah, I like when they give J. Jonah Jameson just these small acts of kindness, and they do it throughout the trilogy. Just the idea that he's a really nice guy. He just fucking hates Spider-Man for no reason.
Because it's good news. Peter Parker is hired by the Daily Bugle. Green Goblin attacks Daily Bugle. Spider-Man is captured by the Green Goblin, wakes up. Green Goblin offers him to team up with him, saying, this city is pretty soon gonna hate you. And then immediately after that, Peter Parker was walking past a newsstand where there are articles being written about J. Jonah Jameson demanding the arrest of Spider-Man for teaming up with the Green Goblin, because that's what it looked like. Or he showed up to save Jameson, and Jameson's like, yeah, no, he's working with him. I want him arrested. And now the entire city wants Spider-Man arrested.
Apparently. Minor problem with this movie. They don't really show New York hating Spider-Man that well.
No, but at least it's a thing, which is more than what The Amazing Spider-Man had.
Well, no, I would say The Amazing Spider-Man did much better on New York hating Spider-Man.
Well, the police do. New York itself.
Whatever. One night, Mary Jane is walking home from work and she gets attacked by some muggers / rapists. Not sure what they were planning to do.
This is a PG-13 movie. They're just muggers.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, they see her go into a back alley and then one of them's like, hey, let's go get her! Very loudly, which Spider-Man hears, so he shows up and he saves Mary Jane.
Yeah.
And we get this very, very famous shot, and it is a pretty good shot, of Spider-Man kissing Mary Jane in the rain, upside down.
It's sweet.
After that, Green Goblin dresses up like an old lady to kill Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, help, I'm an old lady in a burning building! Psych, I'm the Green Goblin. I'm gonna kill you, and oh, you ran away because you have to go to your Thanksgiving dinner with me, because we're all having Thanksgiving together and we know each other, and I figure it out because you have a cut on your arm.
Mm-hmm.
Ho ho ho.
Spider-Man also saved a baby.
He did. Good job, Spider-Man.
The pacing in this movie is a little weird. It's very rushed, because it's like they are in school and then they graduate, and then next thing you know, it's like a montage, and then it's November.
And it never seems to be winter in this movie.
Yeah, so in the fight with the Green Goblin in the burning building, Goblin manages to throw one of his pumpkin blade things at him, which scratches his arm. That night at Thanksgiving dinner, Peter's arm starts bleeding. And because of that, Norman now realizes, oh shit, I could have lifted up his mask and realized it was Peter Parker a long time ago. But I did not. So it took until Thanksgiving and me insulting my son and his girlfriend in front of their faces.
Hey, what if Imagine if Peter got the cut somewhere else and, like, Green Goblin murders his family to get revenge on Spider-Man and, oh shit, Spider-Man's not actually Peter Parker. He just cut his arm somewhere. Ooh, that's not good.
Yep, imagine that. That would have sucked, wouldn't it?
But anyway, Green Goblin, he wants to stop Spider-Man. Actually, wait, what is Green Goblin's motivation in the second half of this movie? Because he killed all the people he wanted dead, and, like, Spider-Man wants to stop him from killing people, but there's no one else to kill. So he's just trying to kill Spider-Man. I mean, I get it. He's a cackling, blow everything up, destruction villain. He doesn't need to have the most logically consistent motives. But he is kind of dumb in the second half of the movie.
I think what they're going for was the fact that he's just this shallow billionaire douchebag. Like, he has a line, I believe it was immediately as the fight in the burning building ends. He basically says, "No one says no to me," which I feel like in the first half of the movie, he's a billionaire douchebag, but he's also trying to be the best father and the best person he can be. But as the movie goes on, once he chooses to go through the physical enhancement process, he loses his mind. He starts going insane. And as the film goes on, he just degrades and becomes this worse and worse person because he's losing his mind. It's this egotistical, prideful billionaire mindset that's taking over because of his growing insanity. Now, whether or not that comes across well in the film, which I hesitate to say that it does, because as much as I do love this movie, I really would have liked to have seen more of Norman Osborn in the first half. And like see his character, his story, what's going on in his head. But no, we just kind of get a few scenes every once in a while checking in on him, seeing what's going on. So I think what's going on is he's like losing his mind and he's just like, oh, I have this enemy now. That's what I need to go after.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's dumb.
Yeah.
Which is a very slight distinction. So, Green Goblin, he knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He wants to kill Spider-Man, so he goes after Spider-Man's loved ones. He breaks into Aunt May's house, and like, Aunt May's praying, and she's like, "Protect me from Satan, God." Bah, I'm the Green Goblin. Haha. Keep praying. It's so ridiculous, and it works.
That was an intense scene. It always has been. Because like I said, I was really young when I saw this. And then seeing Aunt May in shock, freaking out, screaming, crying in the hospital afterwards. Like the aftermath of that. When Peter realizes that the Green Goblin now knows who he is. And when she's like, his horrible yellow eyes, it's like, damn. He is, like, evil. He's going after an old lady.
So, after that, Harry offhandedly mentions to his father that Peter is in love with Mary Jane. And also, Harry still has feelings for Mary Jane, which means bad parenting, Norman, to kill your son's girlfriend. Just saying.
Uh-huh. I mean, wouldn't anybody do that?
No!
You're not a millionaire, Casey. I wasn't asking you.
You ain't either, bitch.
Yeah, that's very true. I guess I'm not asking myself. Anyway, so yeah, Green Goblin kidnaps Mary Jane. Spider-Man confronts him as he's on the Brooklyn Bridge holding a tramway filled with school children in one hand and then Mary Jane in the other and gives him an ultimatum saying, "We are who we choose to be. Now choose." And he drops them off the Brooklyn Bridge. And Spider-Man manages to catch both of them. And just as he's barely able to hold on, Green Goblin starts attacking him. And it's a pretty intense scene. The action in this movie, it's a mixture of practical and CGI. And the CGI, as we said, is noticeable, but the action in this movie is pretty damn good, I think. And this scene, it's intense. Like, Spider-Man's trying to get Mary Jane to slide down to the tram, and as Green Goblin is attacking them, a bunch of people on the Brooklyn Bridge start throwing shit at the Green Goblin, taking Spider-Man's side. Saying, yeah, the city was against him, but now we recognize him as the hero he is. And it's very inspirational. Added to the fact that at that exact same time, a boat is going underneath them with the intent on Spider-Man dropping the tramway onto the boat to save everybody.
The climax of this movie is just phenomenal in so many ways. We have Spider-Man saving Mary Jane and the kids. We have the New Yorkers showing up to avenge him. After Spider-Man saves the day, Green Goblin drags him away to a graveyard for their full final battle, and they exchange some blows. Spider-Man knocks a wall on him, pounds the shit out of Green Goblin, and then Green Goblin reveals that he's Norman Osborn and says, "Don't hurt me, Goblin's an evil alternate personality," which, I mean, he's not wrong.
Right.
And he says, "Don't hurt me, Peter. I've always been like a father to you." And Spider-Man says, "I had a father. His name was Ben Parker. I also had another father before him. His name was Richard Parker. He did a bunch of, mad science stuff and then died, but I don't care in this continuity because, seriously, who gives a shit?"
Right, exactly. As he's talking to Spider-Man, begging for his life, the Green Goblin's glider comes up behind him, blades out, and starts flying at Spider-Man, and he flips backwards, narrowly escaping, and the blades pierce through Green Goblin's stomach. And before Norman Osborn dies, he asks Peter to not tell Harry. The blades that killed him were from his own glider. That will not be important at all to the rest of the series.
Well, I mean, if it does end up being important to the rest of the series, I'm sure it will be in a way that makes sense and isn't stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And at Norman's funeral, Mary Jane comes up to Peter and tells him that she's in love with him and wants to start a relationship. And Peter fucking friend zones her. He friend zones Mary Jane Watson.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole thing about Spider-Man is, with great power comes great responsibility. He has a guilt complex. He doesn't want his loved ones to be in danger. It is a good character moment that he rejects Mary Jane. But also...
Come on, dude.
Dude!
Come on, man. I will say, I do think, though it's kind of a little cringy at times in the third installment, I will say, I do think the relationship between Peter and Mary Jane is a strong point in this movie and going forward.
Yeah, it's decent.
Well, when I say strong point, I mean, it works. It's good. It's believable.
Yeah.
But that said, in this movie, it exists for Peter to say, no, I can't do this. I can't have happiness because I'm in the position to do something good and I have a right to do that.
And yeah, Mary Jane's a damsel in distress in this one, which is, I mean, that's kind of not great, but I mean, it's not like they did that in every single other Spider-Man movie ever.
Oh, wait. They did.
Wait! Homecoming! That is the one movie, it is the one of the 6 movies that doesn't have a climax where Peter is saving the pretty girl who's a hostage.
Mm-hmm. But what are you gonna do?
Make better Spider-Man movies is what they should do.
It's exactly what you're gonna do. But yeah, also in his funeral, Harry Osborn tells Peter that he is now on a revenge mission against Spider-Man. And that's the end of the movie. What I liked about this movie, I thought that the acting all around, except for Tobey Maguire, I thought Tobey Maguire was a little wooden at times. Everyone else is great, especially Willem Dafoe and J.K. Simmons. James Franco, Kirsten Dunst were good. Cliff Robertson and Rosemary Harris as Uncle Ben and Aunt May were great. All the little fun cameos like Joe Manganiello, Ted Raimi, Randy Savage, Octavia Spencer, stand-up comedian Jim Norton, who has one line. He's in a montage and he's like, "I think he's a menace." That's all he says.
That guy would be friends with Jonah.
Yeah, I thought all the acting was great. Tobey Maguire had a bit to be desired at times, but the acting was great. I thought the action was great. A lot of it was very impressively in-camera live action, but there were some pretty noticeable CGI moments that were kind of painful. But that said, I thought that worked with the tone of the film.
You know, there's actually this one very infamous shot in this movie, and talking about how the internet and culture changes our perceptions with movies. I never noticed it in past viewings, but because I've seen the post 1,000 times making fun of it. Did you notice that one shot when Peter saves Mary Jane at the Thanksgiving parade that's really bad, where she's very clearly hugging a dummy, and also her hair is flowing the wrong way?
Yeah, I noticed it.
Yeah, I will never not see that because I've heard people mention it's a bad shot. And now you'll never not see it.
Her hair is blowing in the exact opposite way.
Tobey Maguire's a bit wooden in scenes, but man, he was wooden in that shot.
This movie is so nostalgic for me. I'm really glad I had the opportunity to rewatch it and review it for the show here. I will say there was a little fun piece of that I thought was a little fun in a morbid kind of way. The teaser trailer for this film came in 2001, and it was of a bunch of men robbing a bank and getting out onto the roof where they escape in a helicopter. And as they're about to escape, they're flying and then they jerk to a stop. And then the camera cuts back to the men and the helicopter are stuck in a giant spider web between the Twin Towers.
I mean, what's wrong with that? Oh god, 2001?
Yep. Then later that year, 9/11 occurred. Needless to say, that trailer was taken out of circulation immediately as that happened. It's really morbidly funny to think about, like, that was, like, going to be the marketing for it. Or that was the marketing for it for a little bit. And then one of the worst acts of terrorism ever happens, and then they have to take it out of circulation. There was, however, a series of posters released where reflected in Spider-Man's glasses are the Twin Towers. Once again, once 9/11 happened, those posters were also taken out of circulation. But there's a number of them still out there, which makes them very rare and very valuable.
Talking about Spider-Man and 9/11, because I guess that's the tangent we're on.
Yeah.
You know the PS4 Spider-Man game?
Yes.
There's a really interesting Easter egg in it where the buildings, they got windows on them. They reflect other buildings. If you go to this one building that's near Ground Zero, you can see the Twin Towers reflected in it, even though they aren't there in-game. And that's a really nice Easter egg.
Totally.
Enough 9/11 talk. Let's get back to talking about Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
This movie, it's cheesy. Tobey Maguire's not a great actor. Some of the story beats are a bit dumb. But this movie has so much heart and so much charm. It, more than any other superhero movie we've watched on the show, I would say, really gets what makes a good superhero movie. You gotta have this good hero who saves people and inspires hope, and this movie does that. Everything in the climax is fantastic. A lot of the supporting actors are fantastic. It's cheesy, but that just makes it more likable. I really like this movie.
At one point, there's a part when Peter decides he wants to get a car. He is looking through the newspapers, looking at cars for sale, and over the footage of that is superimposed a footage of Mary Jane, and superimposed over that is footage of a car with them two in it. And I'm just like, oh, you're having fun there, aren't you? Sam Raimi is a huge fan. He has tens of thousands of comic books. He's a big Spider-Man fan. He's a big comic book fan in general. That's why, like, his entire career, all he's ever made, really, is superhero movies and horror movies. He's a big fan of both. That's why it makes him perfect for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Sam Raimi really understands how to handle this character. He really understands how to make a hero, and this becomes more evident, even more so, in the sequel, which is my favorite Spider-Man movie, not including Into the Spider-Verse. I need to watch both of them back to back and see how they compare. But Sam Raimi did a great job with this. I think this is a great movie. There's a reason why there's a big superhero craze. It's because this, in conjunction with a great X-Men movie, a great Iron Man, and a great Dark Knight movie, that we have the big superhero craze that we find ourselves in today.
And also because this movie made more than $800 million is why.
Yeah, that also helps. That doesn't hurt at all.
But speaking of how great this movie is, if you were to numerically describe how good it is, what would that number be?
I'd probably give this movie an 8.5 out of 10. I love this movie so much. It's cheesy, over the top, but it's going for it, you know? It's so much fun. There's so much love and passion for this movie. It's so nostalgic for me, but looking at it objectively, it does have a few flaws. But that said, I still had a great time. I think it's a great movie, and for that reason, I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10.
I'm always a bit higher than you. I'll give it a 9. I like it. It's a really good superhero movie. It's just a good movie.
Yeah.
And the sequel's even better. And the third one had some good ideas and also a lot of bad ideas. I actually don't hate Spider-Man 3.
Neither do I.
I don't hate any Spider-Man movies. I'm an adamant defender of Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man, even though I know they got some problems. I even like some stuff in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Like, Jamie Foxx is good in that, and he's coming back.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
But yeah, that's our review. We'll be back next week, assuming our pizza doesn't get stolen by oh wait, that's the second one.
You can still say it.
Where we're going to be doing a discussion. And it'll probably be a discussion that involves this movie a bit, because we're going to be talking about whether or not the secret identities of some famous superheroes would work.
I'm really looking forward to that. I'm interested. I think we're going to have a good discussion.
Riley, if people like this show for some reason, where can they find it?
You can all find the show on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Silver Age Silver Screen. We post news, post updates to the show, little clips, fun stuff. Check us out on all social media platforms at Silver Age Silver Screen. You can all find me at Riley Thorpe on YouTube, where you can check out all of my latest short films, one of which just got accepted into another film festival, so pretty proud about that.
Congrats.
Thank you. You can also find me on TikTok and Instagram at Riley James Thorpe, where I post a lot of fun content there and post updates to the show as well.
You can all find me on Twitter at Jarmes Casey, Jarmescasey. I post about all my projects there. I have way too many things going on. It's honestly a bit of a problem. You can find all of those projects that there are so many of. Why are there so many? I need to budget time better. At CaseyJarmes.wordpress.com. As always, I'm Casey Jarmes.
And I am Riley Thorpe.
And hey, it's just a movie. Don't lose your head about it.